So I pulled out a lesson that I normally do and I normally do it after we do the teen panels, but I decided to do it in advance this time. It's called Parenting in an Impure World. I've taught this lesson many times. And in fact, one of the advantages and disadvantages of that is I'm very familiar with it, but I've changed a bunch over the years. And this is kind of, I just want you to see basically that I have scribble all over it, right? Am I holding it upside down? No, it's right. And I mean, there's just like notes that go everywhere where I've evolved it over the years. And I really need to retype it because, or edit it, right? Because as I'm reading, I'm going to be going, let me see, here's an arrow over here. And no, that one's scratched out and all that. But the main gist of it, I remember. I just, if I really did the whole thing, it'd be twice as long. So this parenting in an impure world, again, I normally do that right after we have done the teen panel, and we've heard about all this stuff that goes on out there. And really, it's a shock factor, and I wish that we could somehow still pull it together, because it lets you know that there's much more than you think. You think you know some from the news, you think you've heard it before, but sometimes, you know, a lot of stuff comes out, and then this is a good one to say, what the heck do we do about all that? So let's first talk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first kind of give some biblical thoughts about the topic, and then I want to go into kind of our practical section that's a little bit longer. So the first thing is, and I'll just open this up, when I say impure world and I say impurity, what does that bring to mind? Your comments. What does impurity or impure mean to you?
I would say a world that suffers from sin, like being trapped by temptation.
Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of keywords right there, right? Sin and temptation. Yeah, I think so. But then on the other hand, what does it mean when we say something's pure? I'll go ahead and answer that one, because I think purity has been kind of taken over sometimes in the Christian realm to mean sexual purity and things kind of along the lines of what we were talking about last week. But that's really not how the Bible defines purity. Instead, the Bible defines purity as holiness rather than abstention. It's the presence of something rather than the absence of something. It's a setting apart. It's a figurative separation from the secular. It's a commitment to acting according to God's ways. And it doesn't mean that we separate ourselves physically from the world. We're supposed to be in the world, but not be of the world, is the idea. And there's biblical examples. Psalm 119:9 says, how can a young man keep his way pure? By living according to your word. Matthew 5:8, Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And in this case, when he talks about pure, the word he uses is interesting, or the one that's translated from the Greek, is it means like unmixed, unalloyed. Like if you were doing a pure purifying metal, if you had grains that didn't have any other substance in them, it was pure. That's what it's talking about. It's being like 100%, having, when he talks about pure in heart, he's talking about having full allegiance to God. And then Philippians 4:8, Paul writes, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there's anything praiseworthy, think about these things. So to sum up, the Bible sees purity as faithfulness to Scripture, faithfulness to God, and faithfulness to righteous thought in the middle of an impure world. Our youth swim in this impure stream. I get this thought, this image of this boulder being in the middle of the stream with all this stuff rushing around us. But ideally, our children would be like boulders in the midst of that aren't affected by it. And the water just rushes past them without too much erosion, hopefully, because it's a boulder. Then the thing that I think they face and that we face ourselves, as because in all this we should be looking at ourselves when we talk about temptation and sin and purity and impurity. I love Martin Luther's famous quote about temptation. And he said, because we cannot prevent the birds from flying over our heads, there's no need that we should let them nest in our hair. So the birds may fly over our heads, but we don't have to let them nest in our hair. What does that mean? That's a very rich image. First thing is it says in the world, temptation is always going to be with us. Those are the birds. They're always going to be flying. But we don't have to let the birds nest in our hair. And if you think about a nest, a bird would not build a nest in your hair by having this pre-made thing that they got at Hobby Lobby or something and dumping it down right on top of your head, right? They build a nest one twig at a time, one twig at a time. And that's what temptation does to us, is when we yield to temptation, it starts building this nest gradually. And so we want to be able to pluck the twigs out of our hair and swat the birds away and pluck the twigs out when they do get something in there, and be vigilant. And Jesus talked about this in Matthew 5:29. He talks about if your right eye causes you to sin, then pluck it out and throw it away. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. He's talking not about violence. He's talking about vigilance. He's talking about the things that tempt us and the things that erode us in this impure stream. We need to get rid of as quickly as possible. William Barclay says that when Jesus says that the word used in the Bible, the Greek, for causes you to sin, comes from a word that is the bait stick in a trap. So it's the thing that causes you to sin. It's the thing that lures you into the trap, like the bait stick in the trap. I think about at my job, we were at our old building, right about the time we were packing to go, this really ambitious skunk showed up, and every day we had skunk odor, and we were trying everything to figure out where the skunk was, and they finally had the city come out and they set this cage out, and they would put different kinds of food or goodies or whatever into the trap, and they would even have video on the cage, and the skunk would just ignore it, right? And one day they tried something different, and that was the one, right? That was the one where the skunk went in and he got trapped, and ultimately that led to his doom. But it was, he ignored it a lot of times, but it's that bait stick, that bait that lures us into the trap. So I'd say to sum up this part really is that, purity is the presence of holiness, biblically speaking. Temptation is there for us and for our teens. And so we must practice vigilance, and the Bible urges us through Jesus to practice this. And then I think the third thought that we need to remember is that we can all become impure in an impure world. We all are going to sin. We're all going to fall short, and that's where Jesus comes in. The reason Jesus came to earth in large measure is to build that reconciliation and to purify us through his blood, but to purify us so that we are able to go back out into the world fresh with a clean slate, and to try again and to be reconciled to God. So those are some of the biblical thoughts on purity. Now I'm going to go to a completely different thing now that's more on the practical side of parenting. And let me tell you the story behind this and why I've taught this so many times. So this goes back to when my oldest, who's 28, was in 7th grade. I think I may have told this story at retreat, but I know a lot of you weren't there. I can't recall if I actually told it or not. But I had a day that I came home from work, and my son was there, and he had walked home from school, and he said, "Hey, Dad, I got offered drugs today, and it all happened just like you said." And I was like, and he said, and I turned it down, and I went, "Oh, good son, good son. By the way, what did I say?" And actually, I had told him something, and he did remember it. He remembered it better than I guess, at the time, but I had told him this. I said, there's two things that are going to happen with drugs. One is you're going to get offered in middle school, not in high school. I mean, you will in high school, but you'll get offered in middle school first. And he told me on that day, I didn't really believe you. I couldn't believe that it would happen in middle school. And then the second thing is, I said, it's not going to be a guy on a street corner in an overcoat, offering you drugs. And it's going to be a friend, and they're going to make it sound completely natural. And he said, Dad, it all played out that way. Here was my friend and I, we were walking home, and he says, hey, my parents aren't home. You want to come over and do some pot with me? And he said, I was just shocked that he would say that. I had no idea. And I said, no, I can't do it because I got to get home. My parents need me to do something, and so he just used us as an excuse, which if you hear, if you were at retreat, I talked about this a lot, is, always let yourself be an excuse to get out of something, right? And help them get out of things through code words that they can text you or through calling you or whatever. If they give the code word, then you say, you're coming home right now. So I went to Sunday school that week, and I was sharing with my class. I said, I have a joy and a concern. My son got offered drugs, but then he turned it down. He said, our preparation had helped him. And the class went, what did you do? Could you teach us a lesson next week on what you did to prepare your child? And so, it had to be more than just one statement. So I was like, And I went on this site. I don't know if it still exists, but it was called Parents the Anti-Drug. I don't know if you remember, the government put out something, in the war on drugs. And when I read through what they had, I went, you know what, we're doing all this stuff. And maybe this is a good structure for a Sunday school lesson. So really, this is what I'm going to share to you now. What I want to do is go ahead and share my screen. Where's my, there we go. Share the screen. And I'm going to show the second screen here, but I'm going to pull over. Yeah, I really do want to do it there. Okay. And let me pull over the, wait, not quite ready. Okay, put that over and enlarge it. So I want to go through, this is what the Parents the Anti-Drug said. And then I want to amplify on each one. So there's 11 points that I want to go through. So the first one is set rules. Let your teen know that drug and alcohol use is unacceptable and that these rules are set to keep him or her safe. And set limits with clear consequences for breaking them. Now, they're talking about drug and alcohol use, but really, we've talked about this before when we talked about same-page parenting, when we talked about the choices chart. We talked about all these things about setting rules and having consequences. And that'll come up more on the next one as well. But I think the power of this one is, I think you should be clear with your teen on what your expectations are. So the thing I would say to my kids are, I expect that you will not use alcohol until you are legal drinking age, period. And they would say, well, Dad, I kind of know that's how you feel or whatever. I'd say, look, I want you to be exactly crystal clear on where I stand. I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to tell you, this is where I stand on things, and this is my expectation. So I think that, going along with this, you can have warnings about staying away from parties where it's being served. I think of a story. I don't know if I've told you this before or not. It's hard to remember because I've moved things around between lessons. But, there's one rule of thumb that I heard a teen say that I thought was great. She said, if I go into a party, if I don't know more than 50% of the people there, I leave because I don't know what's going to go down. Okay, second item is praise and reward good behavior for compliance, enforce consequences for non-compliance. Again, this is just parenting 101. We talked about choices chart. We talked about having consequences and them understanding what those consequences were. We talked about having reward systems. Also, we based ours on the fruits of the spirit, but there's other ways to do the rewards. So, basic stuff. I say basic stuff, and yet I don't know that people always do such things and are really clear about what the rules are. And one of the benefits of the choices chart was that if you don't have it, we can go back and look through your emails and stuff. I think I probably sent something out about it. If not, let me know. But I think it was all on the same page, parenting. So it was probably you picked up in class with it. um, but I think with the choices chart, some of the power of it is it's very, very explicit. It sets the consequences in advance. It doesn't have you make stuff up as you go along. And so I think that's what's very powerful. Okay, the third one is know where your teen is. Now we're going to start getting into more of the rubber meets the road. Know where your teen is, what he or she will be doing during unsupervised time. Research shows teens with unsupervised time are 3 times more likely to use drugs. Unsupervised teens also more likely to engage in risky behaviors like you see listed there. And it's particularly important after school in the evening hours and also when school is out during summers and holidays. So we used to talk about having clear start and stop times to do things. The phrase we would use is there is no blank check. Like when you leave the house, when you go off to do something, I don't give you a blank check where you get to fill in all the fields of it, with the amount of money, with all the parameters that you want to put in. No, when you leave the house, you are under like, when am I going? When am I coming back? What am I going to be doing with this? I'm going to be at this place. From the time they were little, we expected them to always say, you're going to be here, and if you move somewhere else, you have to let us know. It was a basic thing my mom and dad used to do, and I didn't realize then how much control there is as part of that. But it's like, no, if you're going to move somewhere else, let's talk about you moving from one place to another. So sometimes as they get older, you have different discussions along those lines when they're driving, but you're still trying to understand what is the scope you're going to be in and all that. It may not be a station to station at that time. I think one thing about this part of teens being unsupervised is they can even be unsupervised in your own home with you there. So Billy Eccles Richter used to be the youth minister at St. Andrew and now has led Grace Avenue for a long time. He would talk about how our homes are laid out sometimes where the teens are in one wing and the parents are in another wing of the house. And there was a situation like that for some teens at St. Andrew back in the day when Billy Eccles Richter was there, that there was a high school girl, she was about a junior, and then there was a middle school boy who was like 7th or 8th grade. And the girl was sneaking out the window all the time. Well, she was starting to do some risky behaviors, and her brother got curious about it. He and a friend, I think with her help, got cigarettes, and they tried them, and they thought that was the greatest buzz. And so they said, what else is there? So they decided to start doing more and more and more, and it accelerated rapidly. This kid was sneaking out every night to do stuff. His sister was enabling him to do it. And within 2 months of his first cigarette, this kid got busted at school for trying to deal what he thought was cocaine. And the only reason he didn't get banned forever from there was it wasn't cocaine. He had been fooled by somebody and it was actually some other substance. So this kid went through a long time of rehab and all kinds of stuff. Now, that's the worst case horror story, but my point is that this is what happens when we're not vigilant and watching what happens with our teens. The parents had no idea any of this was going on. Okay, so the fourth one, let me say one other thing here. I think it comes up I tell you what, let me wait until another one, and then I'll talk about it. It's something that can be one place or another. So, okay, talk to your teen. Shopping, riding in the car, ask how things are going, blah, blah, blah. I think everybody does this to a certain extent. Maybe we should do it more. We talked about this before, about the 11 p.m. thing a couple of weeks ago. So for those of you who weren't with us or didn't watch the video afterward, my tip that I got from another parent that has worked great, and I've shared it with others, and I've always gotten great feedback on it, is if you want to know what's going on with your kid, go talk to them after 11 p.m. at night. And the reason is that is a time when they're actually most awake. And if you go into their bedroom, you're kind of on their turf, not your turf, with the dining room table where we, can feel like an inquisition in front of everybody. You can go in and have a private conversation and they'll open up. And I have parents consistently tell me, I am so worn out from this because they get going and I want to go to bed. And then, they're just talking and talking and I want to hear what they have to say, but I have to go to work the next day and I'm so tired. So it's worked great. And it still works great with my college age daughter. I'll tell you that. So anyway, so that's one thing. And then the other thing about talking to your teen is, I mentioned this on retreat. I know not all of you were at retreat, but I'm going to mention it again, is sometimes you have to reintroduce yourself to your teen. They are changing very rapidly. It may not seem like it, but think about when you were growing up. I'll bet to you freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years are very distinct in your mind about what was going on, what you were like, who your friends were, what your activities were. They were all not just one blur. It was very separate kind of things. And so your teen is changing very quickly. And I always say, reintroduce yourself to your teen every 6 months. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now because I got more to cover. But anyway, just realize you need to freshen your view on your teen and don't think they're always like this or that. They change. I know what I did was whenever I felt like I could almost tell when I was changing, and my parents maybe should have clued in on this at some point in time. When I was changing, I went and rearranged my room. Every time I felt like I was going through a change in my life, I don't know why, I just expressed it by moving all the furniture around my room. It's like it was a new me, I needed a new room. So. Okay, number 5, keep them busy, especially between 3 and 6 p.m. and into the evening hours. Let me stop there. That's the little story I was going to tell before, but I decided to tell it now. My oldest son worked at Chick-fil-A for a while. And about 5 p.m. one day, they're looking out in the midst of their busy hour, and they see something kind of unusual going on out in the parking lot. And they called the police, and sure enough, it's kind of what they suspected. There was a teenage couple having sex in a car in the parking lot right outside the Chick-fil-A, right during rush hour with all the drive-through traffic and everything. It's amazing. So 3 to 6 p.m., experts will tell you that's actually sometimes worse than the evening hours because the parents may be both working or occupied and they're out on their own. Engage your teen in after-school activities, supervised programs, sports. Research shows teens who are involved in constructive adult-supervised activities are less likely to use drugs than other teens, and risky behaviors and etc. So let me put one caution upon this because we can overload our kids at the same time. I'm kind of curious whether your kids are a little less stressed in some ways by not having the same schedule that they always have. I don't know if anybody's experienced that, but I could see that happening, right? Where they don't have the overburdening schedule of going here, 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 here. And so we can overload our teens. So you don't want to over-rotate on this. Billy used to say, if you expect, how did he put it? He said, if we force adult problems on our youth, they will seek adult solutions. I thought that was a very interesting aspect. If we're trying to get them to grow up fast, they're going to grow up fast in other ways that we don't want them to. Okay, number 6, check on your teenager. Just checking in where the kids are, where they say they're going to be, that they're spending time with who they say they're going to be with. I think I've told the story before about my daughter getting grounded for this thing. It's the rare time that she got into trouble, but she got into trouble big time by lying about where she was. And she was with who she said, but they weren't where they were supposed to be. And I caught them. So one of the things she actually proposed, because I said, your mom and I need to understand how we're going to trust you going forward. And she actually proposed using Snapchat, that you could take a picture of where you are. Now, in the day that this happened, Snapchat only allowed real-time photos and you instantly posted them. Now they allow stored photos. So that's not as great. But something like FaceTime would be something that might work, where you say, okay, I want to FaceTime you. And once we proposed this, it was funny because sometimes I would just spot check. I would just text her and I said, Snapchat now. and not that she was doing anything wrong or that I even suspected. I just wanted her to know that I was going to do it and that I might do it at any time. So I did have a big conversation after this with my oldest son. I think I've mentioned this before, that there was a friend of his that he would go to gatherings, let's say at their house, but the parents, I didn't really like or trust them that much. And they allowed, it turned out, I found out later, just about anything to go on at these parties. And, I was so furious about it. And I asked him yesterday, you know, well, let me say this. I just threw out, here's different ways I could have handled this. What would you have thought if I had done them? And he goes, now that I'm older, I can see why you would do that, but I think it would have freaked me out as a kid. And I remember some of the seniors the last couple of years, we've talked about this balance between control and trust for a parent. And what the teens have said in those panels is that if you show a real lack of trust, then it's going to foment rebellion. It's going to actually cause more problems. They're going to think, it's this chain that you're holding them on, and they will try more things to get off the chain, and that trust means more to them. So there's some balance here. I'm not saying, have this really tight control. Let them know there's some controls there. We're helping their decision making, as we talked about in Ready, Set, Goodbye. We're a safety net. We want what's best for them, and we want to help them through this time of temptation. And at the same time, we don't want to be that dominant parent that we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago either. And my son said something else. He and my other children have always said, Dad, what really hurts us the most is when you say that you're disappointed. We'd rather you be angry at us, but when you say you're disappointed, that is the worst thing. And so recently my son had something where he felt that way. And he said, yeah, I wasn't so much angry with the person as I was disappointed. He goes, it's kind of like the way you used to manipulate us. I went, I didn't manipulate you. I was disappointed. And I said, isn't it a real feeling that you're having? And he goes, yeah, I get it now. That, yeah, you can feel disappointed and the anger is a lot less than the disappointment. So anyway, all that to say, this checking on your teenager, you can go put devices on the car to know where they are at all times, right? But they're just going to work their way around that too. And I think it distinctively shows a lack of trust. So you have to find some balance there between the control and the trust. And where exactly that is, I think is really hard to just tell you in a lecture. So, okay, let's go on to the next one about family core values, establishing core values, mission statements that reflect your family core values. You can create that together ideally. You want to talk about what we stand for as a family, and to see if you can gain some agreement on what it is. You want to provide this compass to your kids. It says, this is directly off the old anti-drug website, the void will be filled by the strongest force. Church is a great place to get those core values. I think in Ready, Set, Goodbye, we talked about that some. The choices chart should reflect them. One of the most powerful things I think in our family was a time when I was out of work. And I gathered the family and I said, look, we've been really active in church and we've shown our faith and everything, but people are watching us now. Are we faithful in the times when things are going against us? So what kind of faith do we really have? What is our family all about? And it was during that time that my middle son was able to write this essay at school. And he said, we've been raised in our family that faith is foremost, and he was in middle school when he wrote something like that. So I think it was a time when I was able to use that to really push our core values. So it can be during a time like this. It might be a good time to talk about it with your family. Okay, spend time together. Right now you could use a little less probably, but anyway, being involved in your kids' lives, creating this bond. I think this is human nature. This kind of thing happens at work, creating bonds when I was a manager with my employees so that, when you have to ask them for more, that they'll respond. And I think the same thing happens with your kid. Okay, number 9, learning the facts, taking time to learn the facts about drugs, drinking, and being able to express to your teen what some of the dangers are that they're going to face with that. You also, I mean, you just need to get educated on everything. Sharing of pornographic selfies, believe it or not, we talked about that during the retreat. If you weren't there, there was some data that said that about 30% of the boys and 15% of the girls in our high school youth group had shared pornographic selfies, not necessarily theirs, but maybe they passed them around or whatever, which is actually technically illegal to do that for of a minor. You need to know about cutting. You need to know what the signs are of different kinds of drug use. You need to know what today's pop songs are really saying and find out if your kids even know. I had a Covenant group. It was really funny. I don't know if you remember a song from maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it was longer, but it was called Turn Down for What? And the kids would be at school, they'd be singing, or at church, they'd be singing, turn down for what? And whenever I don't know what something means, I go grab and, I go Google it online with an Urban Dictionary and I find out what does it mean. And so I said, do you guys know what it really means? And they said, no. And I said, well, turn up means getting high or getting drunk, and turn down means getting sober. And when you say turn down for what they're saying in the song is, you got to give me a good excuse to get sober. What am I getting sober for? That's what the song means. And after that, they never sang it again at youth group, because then they knew what it was, but I knew what it was too, right? So, okay. Get to know your teens' friends. Oh my gosh, this is so difficult, and their parents. I mean, it says like inviting them over for dinner, talk to them at soccer practice, whatever. Okay, that's part of it. Okay, this is one where I'm a little bit cynical. It's absolutely essential, but this is so difficult. Your teen is casting such a wider net in high school. They roam much farther than their neighborhood. You are having them involved with parents you may never even talk to or see. You have to go out of your way to create those. You're not going to bump into them. You're not going to probably have them over for dinner, but you may need to call them and just talk about, hey, my son's been coming over there some. I just wanted to get to know you and get to know your family a little bit, and give them a call, or, whatever it is. I mean, I think you're going to have to create ways, and it's not going to be just, all going to dinner together. It's a very vulnerable time. When they're in preschool, we want to almost do background checks on everybody that's going to be around our kid, but much worse when they're in high school, for this kind of thing. Okay, let's go on to number 11. Stay in touch with adult supervisors of your child, camp counselors, teachers, the whole bunch. Be a partner with them. Have them inform you of changes in your teen. They may not reach out. If you build that pathway to begin with and say, look, if there's something going on with my kid, let me know. I want to know if you suspect anything or if you know anything. I think that's fair. They talk about some of the warning signs of drug use and everything here. Now, I do want to talk about adult supervisors, and I think that they're extremely valuable. No matter how good of a parent you are, no matter how much of a partner you are, you're still a parent. And until you get to be up into the adult years with them, it's going to be hard to be their friend. They are going to look for others, and they need positive adult role models. I was very blessed that I felt like each of my kids had positive adults in their lives that made a real difference. Some of them are still in touch with my kids today, and that's a real blessing. One thing I want to point out, and I mentioned this last week, something I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I want to share out of my own family experience, or my growing up family experience, and also out of my experience as a youth counselor. Girls 13 to 15 need positive adult male role models. 13 to 15, they need positive adult male role models. And ideally, that's dad. And believe me, if dad doesn't provide it, they will find their role model somewhere else. And it may be somebody you want, and it may be somebody you don't want. I could walk through the room when I was doing youth work, and just, I would work the room. I'm talking to everybody. I could tell you which girls had good relationships with their dads and which didn't. I'll bet with 80 to 90% accuracy. Sometimes what I would do is check myself, and later on I'd ask a question about it, about relationship with their father. My sister, one of my sisters, I have three, one of my sisters, during a time when my parents were separated and my mom was not allowing my dad to be a real father to her, she went and found an adult male role model. It was her band director, who was a sexual predator. They started dating when she was 16 years old. Why my parents, I guess they were just so dysfunctional at that time, but why they did not get this guy arrested, I'll never know. But anyway, that was a very negative experience that has had a lifelong impact on my sister. If you're in a situation, and I know some of you are, or some of you know people who are, where it is a multi-household situation and there can be tension, please let the dads, who are involved, be positive adult male role models. It is so essential. There was a girl one time at youth group who was in such a situation. She had been coming, it was about the fourth week she was there. We kind of hit it off. We talk and everything, but I was walking past her talking to a group of kids, and she went, "Cecil is my best friend." And I went, whoa. This is a seventh grade girl saying Cecil is my best friend. Now, if someone was of low character, they would take advantage of that situation. But instead, I started talking to her and I said, "So what's going on at home?" Turned out her parents were divorced. Her dad was in another state. She was really missing him. And her mom was dating a guy that she didn't really like. And so she didn't like the one role model, and she needed the other role model, and she looked for a third one, and that was me. So really, I started talking to the mom and just letting her know, hey, this is what's going on, and then urging her to talk to her mom. But I think I dropped some hints to her mom also about, hey, you really need to talk to your daughter and talk through this. So, and then just one more example. When I was teaching a young adult class a few years ago at St. Andrew, there was a time when we just got talking about some of the history of the young women in the class. And it was amazing to me how many of these young women did not have good relationships with their dads at that age. They would be talking about some difficulties in their life. They would be talking about complications with their parents. And I would say, tell me, when you were 13 to 15-year-olds, what were things like between you and your dad? And consistently at the time, for the ones who had problems, they had issues during that window. So I hope I beat you over the head enough with it right now. This is very important. This is a time right now that your daughter needs a positive adult male role model. And if you're a single mom, you need to be finding that. I was fortunate enough, it was in a day when, people probably wouldn't do it the same way, but I was involved in the lives of some families where it was a single mom who didn't have that adult male role model, and I helped step in for their daughter with their cooperation, and we worked together to provide that male influence at that age. Now, by the time they're about 16, they don't seem to need it so much anymore. They're driving and they're like, "Bye, Dad." But during that time, it's really important. Date your daughter. I mean, one of the things I did with my daughter, we were talking about the things of, how you demonstrate what a man should be like and all that, is I wanted to demonstrate how she should be treated. I wanted to demonstrate her value to me. And basically we would go do daddy-daughter things together, well beyond the age when they're little and they have the daddy-daughter dance. And my wife understood this from having worked with youth herself and seeing all the impacts. So it's a very important time. So dads, please carve out the time right now to go do that. And moms, please be as supportive as possible of that. And if you know other people, right? If you just have boys, I hope you're not tuning me out. I mean, make sure this is the kind of thing that people understand as you talk to them. Okay, so those are all the things I had to present to you on Parents the Anti-Drug. You'll get the slides, and so you'll be able to see all this. If not, let me just go ahead and pray for all of us. Heavenly Father, what a joy and what a burden it is to have children. You know that better than we do as you look at your children, and there's so much that you want to protect us from and to show us what purity is, and yet you have to come and rescue us from all the temptation that's out there. We face the same thing with our kids. Help us to understand how to be the best parents possible, to steer them through this, to find that balance between control and trust, to just take this time and be the best parent investors that we can be, taking our time and our love and our knowledge and investing in them. We lift up our world right now, how confusing it is, how lost we can feel, how lost our children can feel in the midst of this new world. And yet at the same time, it's a world that you've seen before. You've seen pandemics, you've seen strife, you've seen division, you've seen confusion. Guide us through it. Help us as we're lost to find our way through this. We pray blessings on the same groups we've been praying for, people who are shut in, people who are venturing out, people who must venture out, people who are sick, dying, treating the sick, for those who are leading, for those who are economically impacted. So much hurt and pain. Help us to be a light in your world for all that. We lift these things up in your most holy name. Amen. I want to show you something just really quick that I'm excited about, if I can find how to do it again real quick. And this is something that I'm going to be posting on Tuesday. So actually today or last night, I posted my first one, this Devo, on my YouTube channel. And it's also on my Facebook page for Cecil Taylor Ministries, connecting to the human forest. And all throughout May, I'm trying to talk about relationships and how we feed spirits through relationships during this pandemic and beyond. So the first one is up now, called Forests Are Built on Relationships. And on Tuesday, I'm doing one that has turned out to be a very personal one, called Lost in the Woods. I wrote it this morning. I'm very excited about presenting that. And sometimes in these Devos, I can get focused on content and not myself very much. And this is one that's a little more personal this time. So anyway, if you get a chance, please check it out. Hopefully it can make an impact in your life and in others to think about relationships during the pandemic and beyond. Okay. Thanks a lot for your participation. Next week, I intend to talk about handling the big questions, but if I'm able to assemble some sort of panel to talk to you, I will do that as well. So, flexibility over the next couple of weeks that we're together. So, thanks again.